Hey, it's Alina here from Estimate Mastery, and today I would like to talk about saving time in Xactimate. I think there's some little underused tools and tricks that most people don't know, and that's what I'd like to reveal in this video. So let's go take a look at how you can best save time while using the program and making yourself more efficient. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is saving time comes down to which version you're using. So there's actually 3 platforms in Xactimate. You've got your desktop version, you've got the online version, and then of course you have the mobile version that is totally separate as well. So I prefer to use the desktop version of Xactimate because it's loaded directly to my PC. I can load it onto a laptop and go out to the field. It's very versatile. I can carry it around with me, and it doesn't require that I have internet access. Now, if you're going to do Xactimate updates, as you can see, I've got one here ready to go. Or if you need to download a new price list, you do have to be connected to the internet. But other than that, I am mobile and I can go where I want to go with the software because it's loaded to my PC. Now, how do you know if yours is loaded to a PC? It's actually quite easy. You're either clicking on an icon down below or on your desktop to open the program. You're not going to a browser. So if you're going to a browser, it looks like this. You have to open up Chrome or Internet Explorer, and you have to go to Xactimate.com and you have to log into their system using a browser. This is great for teams, in my opinion, because, a team member can be working on it in the office, and then later on at night when they need to make a couple changes, they could log into any PC, no matter where they are, as long as there's a browser and they know their email and password as far as logging into Xactimate. It'll work every time. With the desktop version, like I said, you have to be sitting in front of the PC where Xactimate's loaded. I'm always in front of my PC, so that's not a problem for me. So it's 2 different use cases, in my opinion. If you're logging in online, however, the time it takes to open a project is probably 3 to 4 times longer than it is to open up a project here in the desktop version. So if you just want to see, all I do is double click and then bam, I'm in the estimate. If it was the online version and I hadn't logged in, earlier today, sometimes it takes me 3 minutes to get into an estimate. So that's my only concern, or, for me personally as a time saver, I like to get in and out of things. So how do you know which version? Again, if it's installed locally, you'll be able to disconnect from the internet. You don't have to use a browser. It's always here for you on your PC. The other thing that you can see is you've got a couple other options that are available here on the desktop version. There's some tools and data transfer and a couple other things that I can do here that I can't do with the online in this environment here in the dashboard. So time-saving tip number 2 is you want to pre-fill as many fields as you can as defaults. Again, I think that a lot of this is only available in the desktop version, but I'll show you what I mean. If I go to preferences, I can actually set a lot of the pre-fill options, like my company header, my opening statement. I can set myself as the claim rep so that instead of going into each and every estimate and having to set that up in claim info here, under, the estimator or claim rep, type of loss you can even set up. I mean, there's so many things that you can automate. And then going over to parameters, I'm in the contractor profile. That's why you don't see claim info on this one. But in parameters here, I can preset overhead and profit. I can preset a company header. I can save so many little clicks that I would otherwise have to do, that those seconds turn up into minutes, that turn into hours, that turn into days on the beach. If you watch my videos, you heard me say that a million times, because I don't see the point in wasting time in a software where I can automate pretty much everything as far as data entry. So things like your company header, your opening and closing statement, yourself as the claim rep. Also, if you use interior and even exterior sketch, there's a couple of presets, but this is mostly for interior. You can set a lot of these presets up to roll out to every single estimate that goes into the future. And then if there's a one-off where you need to maybe perhaps change a ceiling height, or your windows are going to be a different height, that's fine. You can change it per estimate or per window, but at least you have a baseline so that most estimates, the average thing that you're dealing with is already preset, already pre-filled for you. So if you do a commercial, for instance, and your wall thickness maybe is a 6-inch wall thickness for whatever reason, or your ceiling heights are in your area generally 10 foot or 7 foot, you can set a lot of this stuff up to save you those little clicks that waste your time every single day using Xactimate. That brings me to another beef that I used to have with Xactimate, which was how hard it was to resequence line numbers. So whenever you're working in a project, you probably notice that it goes from like 1 to 32, back down to, 11. It gets out of sequence really crazy, pretty fast if you don't watch it. And you used to have to go over to documents and go to reports and see how it's already asking me to resequence. I set that up. I'm going to show you how to set that up in just a second. But what used to have to happen is I would have to remember to click right here. Otherwise, when I'm blowing and going and I'm writing, 5, 6, 7, 10 estimates a day, I hardly remember to resequence, to click this little button. So what they've done to help with this, they have allowed us to go ahead and resequence here in estimate items now. So I can go ahead and click on the line item number, right click and resequence. You can also Control Shift N if you're into shortcuts. I am, because again, that's one less click. The more I know my shortcuts, the less clicking I'm doing, the more time I'm saving. But what's really great is there is a preference out in the dashboard of the desktop version. You're going to want to click on Preferences and then go to Project. And if you scroll down to the bottom here, resequence line numbers, I like prompt on print. Prompt on complete means that I have to complete, quote unquote, the estimate. Most contractors don't ever complete their estimates. Adjusters are required to, or contractors doing program work may, complete their estimates, but a normal everyday contractor who's just doing restoration or roofing exterior, you probably don't complete your estimate. So I like prompt on print. So you'll see that when I open up the estimate and I go to documents, go down to reports, it's going to have that pop up. Do you want to resequence? So that I don't have to remember to click that tiny little hyperlink that you'll see here. So yes, and then now it's ready to go. I can print and or preview my report, and I don't have to worry about remembering to click right here or having done it, in the estimate items. It prompts me to do it. That's one of the biggest time savers. The more that you can protect me from myself and making the mistake, the better off I'm going to be. So preferences and project is where you're going to find that. I would say the next time saver that's huge for most people that use Xactimate that you are not doing right now is saving what are called note templates. For every single time you are going to make a statement that you're going to use in the future, you should be saving that as a note template. So first of all, let's look at this line item. I've got seal stud wall for odor control. Now, I know that the adjuster is going to go, what is going on? What do you mean odor control? Well, we had a small fire in this part of the home. And if the adjuster hasn't seen that before or doesn't know the IICRC codes on what I need to be doing for fire, I would explain that by double clicking this little notepad here, which will expand your note. Now we could write our explanation of whatever we need, sealing studs needed for smoke damage. Now that's really basic. I would go way farther. If I'm going to save a note template, I would cite an authority or manufacturer's specs or something like that. Sometimes it is the common sense of why it's needed. If it's something you're getting pushback on all the time, I would save a note for the objection crusher, right? So if they're saying, we're not going to pay for this, say, well, IICRC requires it, or the residential code requires it, or manufacturer spec require it. Sometimes it's a matter of what we think is common sense, but you don't know what you don't know. So if an adjuster feels like they don't know something and you're asking for a line item, they're going, I don't know what that is, or I don't know why they would need that. You can kind of preempt some of this stuff, especially if it's little known items that are used, like maybe a cornice return. You can explain that that's like an arts and crafts project, and that's why Xactimate has a separate line item from the field shingle for a cornice return. Those kinds of common sense language would be great note templates as well. So how do we save a note template? Once you've typed it out, you can see there's a little rubber stamp icon right here with a little floppy disk, because, we still use floppy disks. But we can click there, and then we can name it smoke damage seal, whatever you want to, name it as. And then in the future, anytime I need this same note, it's there for me. So if I open up another estimate and go to another line item, just as an example, you can then use this rubber stamp looking tool here. If you hover, it says load note, and that'll pull up a whole history of your notes. One of my favorite additions to Xactimate in the recent past here is that they added the search. So I can now search my note templates, and that's a great addition. So I could just type in smoke and see what I have available. There it is. And then that would add it to the line item, and now it's saved. So I can use this in the future. You can also share these with colleagues. You can actually share your note templates. So they're a really great resource for you to start, saving them today. Anything that you find, oh man, I'm going to have to use this. I'm going to type this again in my next estimate. That should be a note template that's saved. And to be honest, you can't really save too many. Now that we have the search field here, we can search for whatever we need. Before, I had to be a little bit judicious because it was a whole history of notes I had to scroll up and down. But now that we have the search, man, have at it. Save as many notes as you want. And that way you don't have to retype something in the future, which saves you quite a bit of time, especially if you're a two-finger typer like some of us are. So that's one of the big ones when I talk about saving time in Xactimate. Lastly, I'm going to talk about photos just a little bit. There's tons of time-saving tips about photos, but one of the main ones of getting the photos into Xactimate, it's not fun when you go to the photos section here to have to name all the photos. You have to click on the photo, you have to name it, whatever's, in the picture, I would name it whatever you're, trying to describe in the photo, by the way. The description's fine, but I'd rather just the adjuster read my image name as the description. It just saves them a lot of time figuring out what I'm trying to portray in the photo. But doing this and clicking in and out can take tons of time. So to fast track that, what I would do, I would get the photos, whether you're downloading them from a cloud or, wherever you're dealing with them, try to get them into a local folder so that you can easily rename them. So what I've done is, you can see here, it's not named photo, as you can see on those photos there with the date and timestamp. What you want is for them to be, I like to number them because I will have written my estimate in a very specific way. And I want my photos to follow the line items, if you will. So meaning if I talk about step flashing, further up in my report, I'm putting that photo of step flashing as the first or second photo. Okay, so here, wires need to be detached. See that? Wires need to be detached in order for that fascia to come off. We had fascia damage here. Hail damage to the corrugated roofing. All of this that's being referenced on my line items, I like to put that number 1, 2, 3, and then the description here in the photo file first, because then when I put it into Xactimate, I no longer have to rename my photos. They come in with that name. So for example, I can then load these photos to Xactimate, and you can see here, at least they came in the order that I want them to because I put a number. Now, sometimes it'll usually put its own number in front of it. That's fine. At least I was able to direct traffic, and I know that number 1 will be first, and then it will roll on through the rest of my photos. Also know they're already named. So it's so much easier to just hover, click on the photo. If it's a local photo, you can do this. I don't know about the cloud. So if you use cloud services, you may be able to have this naming convention easily as well. But for example, I just go 6 and I say vent, and then I can hit my tab key, and then I'll go to the next area here, 7, damage to siding. And you get the idea. I would just hit my tab key and it will tab down to the next photo. And that way I'm not clicking. The more clicks you're clicking around every day, the more time you're wasting. So the less time I can get you to spend in your estimate, getting you to learn shortcuts or some way to use your keyboard rather than your mouse. That's usually the case. But here, it saves you all the time of going back and forth in Xactimate, having to click in, type it. Trust me, it saves a ton of time if you can do that out in a folder instead first. All right, so in conclusion here, the 5 time-saving tips I went over today, using the desktop version instead of the online version, you have more options and more control over the preferences and other things with the desktop version. If you have to use the online version, that's fine. It's just going to take you a little bit more time and you won't have as many features available. Secondly, pre-fill any fields or sketch preferences in the software that you can, especially using the desktop version. There's a little bit more options there for you, but anytime you can pre-fill something out that's the average and then change it if something, one-off comes up, you're going to save a lot of time. 3, set up the resequence line numbers upon printing section preference in the preferences under project. Scroll down, you'll see that little checkbox that says resequence prompt upon printing. Not prompt upon complete. You want prompt upon printing. That's the one that'll save you the most time. And then you don't ever have to remember to click the little resequence line item button. I will give a caveat to this. There are some people that like to write the estimate in a certain way and then have the line item numbers, if there's an edit, that the line item number looks like an edit because it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, then 38. And then, it looks like, oh, that's where the edit went in. that's fine, but at least have the pop-up come up. So for the majority of times when you do want to resequence, you don't want to send a wacky looking report, it'll take care of it for you. So that's number 3 on the time saver list. Number 4, be sure to go into each line item every time that you add a line item note, save it as a note template, and trust me, you'll thank me later whenever you don't have to retype that note again. And then number 5, I recommend renaming photos somewhere in a local folder rather than putting them into Xactimate and trying to rename them. Even if the description, all of that should go into the name of the photo in a local folder. And if you type 1 or 2 or 3 before you start to name that photo, it'll actually come into Xactimate in a very particular order that you control. So that was my top 5 time-saving tips just to wrap up here for Xactimate. If you like this type of video, please be sure to, of course, like it down below. And of course, subscribe and ring that little bell if you want to be notified every time that I release tips like this on Tuesdays. My name is Lena Wilson with Estimate Mastery. For more information on our Xactimate and supplementing training for contractors, go to estimatemastery.com. Hope you guys have a great week in your business, and I'll see you next week.